All right, we got Bricker Dixon. He is the only second guy to be on the show twice, but it's because besides Reggie and maybe Coach Hag, but he kind of got screwed because he was on the early years of the interview, the early episodes where we were just having people tell a funny story, and apparently we want to get more information from people now. But I still do have a couple things in mind to ask you about that are funny, FYI, Bricker. You know, got it in mind. But let's talk. We were just talking before we started recording. Let's talk about this because Bricker wrestled at Park Hill, very dominant, good school in Missouri. Coaches at Liberty, currently really dominant, good school in Missouri. So we were kind of talking about the psychology of wrestling and that the cards you can play when you're a coach or a wrestler of being the underdog or also being like the big dog and how you can play those cards at selected times. So you kind of told us an interesting situation, Bricker, that you guys had this year going up to those duels. Why don't you explain that?
Yeah. So in January, we went up to Beat the Streets duels in Chicago. And I think we were ranked we were in the low 20s this year and at that time. And we got to wrestle a couple top 10 ranked teams, Bergen Catholic, Montini Catholic. And I think what was kind of interesting for us to see, because we're the top school in Missouri, but wrestling those top schools in the country, everything's relative. So how we kind of dominate some of the schools around Kansas City, those schools dominate around the country. And I think what was probably the best part for our wrestlers to see was what dominating a match actually looks like. And even a couple of our good kids got dominated. And I think just kind of the way that some of those kids from the other team approached the match, like crossing the line as soon as the whistle blew, just kind of like some of those like tactical things, like wrestling all the way through the edge of the mat. And like at the end of periods, they would wrestle through every single position. And they just wouldn't stop looking to score in all three phases of the match. If they got on top, they were going to try to turn you. If they couldn't turn you, they were going to get out front, hold your head down, and try to get another takedown. So I think that was probably the best part for our kids. And I think it happened at a point in the season where our kids were ready for it because it was in January. We were after Christmas break. And that was kind of set the stage for us going into the rest of the year, into the Winnetonka tournament and into the postseason, that we're the best team in the state, and that's what we need to aim for against our competition moving forward. So I think that they did a good job of trying to apply that the next few weekends and going into the postseason. But that's something that, like, as a program, we're looking to build to, and that's a level we want to get our program at Liberty on.
Yeah, the reason we were kind of talking about it is we were talking about me and Jesse kind of get off on, trying to play I hate to give away the psychological secrets, by the way, but trying to play like the chip on the shoulder kind of, I don't even like to say underdog, because I feel like that sounds defeatist, kind of, more of the I'm going to make this bad for you and you don't even know it type of card. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're in the blind spot. I guess that's the kind of phrase we use. We're in the blind spot. You're not looking at us, but we are going to make this bad for you. So we were kind of talking about the psychology of that versus the psychology of, being like the top dog who you don't want people to knock you off your pedestal, But when we were talking, it's kind of interesting to think, as a wrestler, as a coach, you kind of got to be able to switch modes with that and get your kids to switch modes, depending on the opponent kind of. So I don't know, Jesse, you want to comment on that?
I think it's just what you said, that you got to know where you're at, and you just got to use it to your advantage as a coach, which is the whole thing that we've been talking about. It's like, if you're not the best, but you know that you want to be there, then you kind of got to twist it that way to your kids and let them know, like, hey, they don't think we can do it. And you got to let that feed you. And then like Brick was saying, when you are the top dog and somebody's gunning for you, you got to let that feed you too. You got to let that make you better. But I think it's just really big to actually have the right perception on where you're at, so that you do feed your kids the right psychology too. I think that there's it's a little bit like, I don't know how to say it. It's almost like poison. It's good if you use it the right way. Use it the wrong way, it'll kill you. So you got to make sure that you're using it the right way and using the right amounts too. And then,
yeah, it's always kind of funny when you see or hear a coach try to pull the underdog card where it's clearly not justified. You're like, hey, I don't think we can do it. It's like, actually, everyone thought you could do this. So it's not really one for you. So here's a question for you too, coaching wise. How do you want kids to be psychologically in practice? Because it's kind of, when you have those matches, you get amped up and try to find the mode you need to be in, underdog or spoiler or big dog. But in practice, everyone's comfortable in practice, right? They're wrestling the guys they've always wrestled a lot of times. Right. They kind of know their role. So how do you shake that up so that kids kind of stretch that psychological part of their mind in practice?
Right.
Well, I think what you see happen over the course of a season in wrestling rooms is when guys start to get comfortable, like you said, they kind of start wrestling to a script, because they know they kind of have it figured out who they should beat, who beats them, and who's kind of like a 50-50. And I think that's a dangerous game to get in, because unless you're like trying to beat the guys that are beating you, then I don't think you're going to get much better. And you're just, and you almost get like scared to go off script. And I don't know. I think a lot of it comes down to habits in practice. And I think a lot of them are mindless that kids do. But I think as a coach, I think really communicating with athletes, I think is one of those things that sounds so basic, but I think it's looked all the time and way undervalued. And like communicating on a weekly, even a daily basis of like kind of what you're expecting from. It's one thing to say it to the team, but to have individual conversations with kids, like, hey, I think you need to have this goal this week. Like, let's work on this. And then if you kind of narrow their focus a little bit, give them a goal, I think they're more prone to like kind of be a little more tunnel vision. And I think when you're trying to improve your wrestling and kind of catch the guys in front of you, I think you need to work on a couple things at once and not work on too much, because then things can be overwhelming and you're trying to just correct everything. And I think when you give kids like one or two things to work on and have them be a little more intentional, then I think that can go a long way. And kids catching the guys in front of them and widening that gap between the kids that they should be beating.
Yeah. How do you try to keep your kids mentally flexible in practice, Jesse?
Yeah, I think Brick brought up a really good point. There's probably like 3 types of kids that you're going to have in the room. If you're an individual, you're going to have the guys that you can beat, the guys that you're even with, and the guys that are going to beat you. I think that's our good mix of partners, though, too. You know, because you're getting pushed, you're getting everything that you need. But like, how do you push yourself against, like Brick was saying, against those guys that you're not beating? I think Brick brought up something really good, like communicating with them, just giving them a challenge, you know, when they're with that kid that they're either even with or that they can't beat right now. Like, okay, what can you do today? I've always been a trash talker, you know, as a coach. I enjoy that aspect. So I've always kind of used that to get guys fired up and just be, you know, talk some trash to them while they're getting beat, especially if you see what Brick's talking about. Like if they're kind of on a script, like, oh, I'm wrestling so-and-so, I'm just going to lose. You know, that's when I like to get in there and get on them a little bit and try and poke at their ego a little bit and see if that'll get them going. Because sometimes there's probably not the fight that there needs to be there in a high school room all the time. I think Brick can talk to that a little bit too, but you know, that's what you want all the time, I think, is for the kid, no matter what partner they're with, is to push themselves to get better, right? Which is what Brick was talking about, you know. So it doesn't matter if you're wrestling a kid that you can beat, you know, how are you getting better? If you're wrestling a kid that's the same, if you're wrestling a kid that's better than you, how are you getting better right now in this time period? I think that's got to be something that's got to be emphasized to kids. I've always tried to just tell them, like, you know, there's no scoreboard in here, so just go out and get after it. I mean, you know, in your head if you won or lost or if you did something good or bad, but you know, that's the only way for you to get better. It's kind of a free space and time to just let it fly and not have any repercussions for anything that happens other than for your own improvement.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna switch topics here because we just were talking about that, so I thought, hey, let it roll. Let's throw it out there. You know, want to get kind of talking about an experience that Brick went through. First of all, how did you after high school? You went to Cornell University. It's an Ivy League school, obviously super high level. So what was the process like in you choosing to go to wrestle at Cornell, knowing that's going to be obviously a tough situation across multiple fronts?
Yeah. Well, back then, and I say back then, it really wasn't that long ago, but the recruiting rules were different back. This was not even 10 years ago. This was 9 years ago. And coaches couldn't contact you until I think it was July 1st, before your senior year of high school, over the phone. And I had a good junior year, and I knew Fargo. That was kind of the Super Bowl in the middle of July. But with those recruiting rules, I kind of knew that was going to be a huge tournament for me. And I did really well there. And Cornell was one of the first schools to reach out to me. And at that point in time, the fall of my senior year of high school, they were the preseason #1 ranked team in the country. This was before Penn State had gone on their run. And so to me, that was pretty cool. And I was watching guys, Troy Nickerson, Jordan Lean, like those, Cam Simaz, they were wrecking shop. And they were like at this really good academic school too, all at the same time. So when they contacted me, that was kind of, I thought that was a pretty cool opportunity if it would present itself further, and it did. And I took a visit out there. So yeah, that's I don't want to make it sound like the decision-making process was any different than what a lot of kids narrow it down to. It's pretty much two things: the academics and the wrestling program. And at that point in time, they seemed to have the best combination for me. And I liked the coaching staff, and it seemed like a practical fit at that point in time. There was a guy that had backed up Troy Nickerson for a few years that was really good. And he was going to go into his 5th year when I was a freshman. His name was Frank Pirelli, and he ended up making the semis his senior year. I was a freshman, so I had kind of sat behind him my freshman year. And yeah, that was kind of the start of it.
Yeah. So I don't think people here, in the Midwest maybe know a lot about Cornell other than just, Kyle Dake and all that stuff. So we're kind of interested in the coaching side of it. I know that Rob Cole and those guys were kind of known for being a little bit outside of the box maybe in their approach to it, maybe a little bit more, I don't know how to say it, like business minded almost. So what were those guys like as coaches and everything?
Yeah, I mean, Rob Cole, he was, he's a CEO of Cornell Wrestling, and he has built that program from a very low level to now a consistent top 10 team in the country. So, I mean, just like one thing that like maybe, well, I know that this is different than what a lot of Division I programs do, but I think a lot of it was about like thinking smarter and like don't like do things that just because they've always been done that way. And I think he really kind of challenged the status quo and like questioned why do things a certain way and why not do it this way. But the example I was going to give was we never did morning practices because we had this famous professor at our school that he had worked with a lot of professional sports teams, and he taught Psych 101, which was a class that was like there was 1,500 kids per class, and a majority of the class was based on sleeping habits and how you can turn that like aspect of your life, and because it's so undervalued, like a lot can come from getting better sleep. And so he worked with Coach Cole and a lot of the teams on campus, and basically had come to the conclusion that college kids aren't getting enough sleep, whether it be from being up late studying or whatever, but they're just not getting the sleep that they need to. So to have these kids wake up at 6 a.m. and go for runs was counterproductive. So that was just like one thing that like I know a lot of programs.
Jesse knows I hate mornings, so big fan of that. Yeah. I remember he told me that when we were coaching together. He was like, yeah, Bricker Dixon goes to Cornell, and he told me that they have a guy there that's done a study that shows that morning workouts are not effective. And I was like, see?
Yep.
Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
I definitely believe that for lifting for kids. So I will say I'll say that much. I definitely believe that for lifting for kids, but afternoon is definitely better, prime time.
Yeah. So we didn't do morning practices. We would do like individuals during the day, like in between if you had a break between classes to get an individual practice, and then we would have our practices in the afternoon. So, but yeah, I mean, the reason then for choosing Cornell was, it wasn't an easy decision because there were other schools that were in the mix, but that at that point in time, it seemed to be a good position to be in, and a program that was only getting better, and a coaching staff that I believed in.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I guess I want you to share this experience if you're good with it and everything, talking about it, because I think that it's kind of it's important to have what you've gone through, be a learning, exercise for other people. And uh, so I think your experience is pretty unique if you want to share your progression through when you were starting the lineup and then that story, how it played out.
Yeah. So like I said, my freshman year, um, I was backing up Frank Pirelli, who went on to All-American. And that when he was a senior and I was a freshman, uh, I mean, he really took me under his wing. And if he wanted to work out at 8 o'clock at night, then I was going to be there. And anytime he wanted to lift, I was with him. And he taught me a lot my freshman year. And I felt like from my senior year of high school to my freshman year of college, I got a lot better. And I had a good freshman year. I won a few opens. I placed at the Southern Scuffle. And I felt like I set myself up to basically accomplish my goal to be an All-American the next year. That was what I was aiming for. And I felt like it was totally realistic based off the freshman year I had and how much better I had gotten. So Nashawn Garrett, he took a year in between high school and college and went to community college for a year. And he got a ton better that year. So I was a freshman at Cornell. He was at the community college next to Cornell, training with our Finger Lakes team. And he got a lot better and like exponentially better. And but I always felt like during that first year when we had wrestled that if we would get in a match, I still felt confident that I would beat him. And so the way that they determined starters was we went to an open at the first of the year, beginning of the season. And I remember I was a sophomore. He technically came in as a freshman. We were the same age. And we both made the semis. I ended up losing in the semis. He made the finals, and he beat the kid that I lost to. And so he was in the lineup then. And he was basically beating everybody from that point forward as a freshman. And he got on like a crazy roll and obviously ended up having an incredible career. He was a 4-time All-American NCAA champ. But our 133-pounder at that time got hurt. And I knew that all of a sudden it changed quick in a matter of a weekend that I was going to be the starter at 125 to now our 133-pounders hurt. So the team needed they needed me at 133. So I bumped up, and I was definitely undersized at that point because I wasn't pulling enough weight to be a 133-pounder. And I was kind of taking some lumps. And, obviously from that point forward, Nashawn, I mean, he wasn't going to be denied. I don't know that he finished lower than maybe fourth at the NCAAs, but in my mind, there is no doubt that I felt like I couldn't have been an All-American at that weight. And, he was better. And that's just the way it was. But I felt, it's tough because, I feel like if I would have started at most other college programs, and I had the option to go to other programs, obviously, when I was being recruited, and didn't see this playing out that way. But it did. And I don't know. I almost get like emotional talking about it, because it's one of those things that, I really wish my career had gone differently in college. And I felt like, and I still feel like to this day that I knew I could compete against the best kids in the country, because I beat a lot of those guys that went on to have all this success. And but that's just the way that the circumstances aligned, and it didn't work out for me. But
Well, this is kind of where I'm going with this because this is kind of a common psychological thread in a lot of wrestling conversations that we have, and also wrestling people's lives. And so, like I told Joe Williamson, like, I'm not a wrestler, never was, just a coach. So I view it through a different lens. But like, I understand you guys, wrestling is a sport where people put a lot of emphasis on a certain placement at a certain tournament, whether that be, high school, state, NCAAs. It doesn't even matter if it's like, D3s, NAIs. Everyone always thinks that they could have done, and a lot of people are right. It's very hard to accomplish things. Randy kind of said it yesterday. If you don't win 4 state titles, you're still fine. If you win 3, 2, 1, if you don't win any, so I think this is kind of a important thing for coaches to kind of analyze together, because a lot of people struggle for a time whenever they don't exactly meet that one goal that perhaps they set, you know what I'm saying? But you get to move forward in some way. So I think that I'm not just trying to say this to you, I think it's important that people know that, you got something else out of the experience, obviously, other than just that,
for sure.
that one, placement in tournament. And also, a lot of times people end up achieving that goal, that placement or whatever at state or, NCAAs or whatever. And it may not be as big of a game changer for them as they thought. You know what I'm saying? So
Sure.
the experience you go through is the real reward, obviously.
Yeah, you're totally right. And that was like hard to see in the moment, like in the heat of the moment when I was in college. And my older brother, he really helped me through that and gain perspective on where the value in our sport really lies. And yeah, I felt like I did it the right way, and that I kept fighting. And really that like rinse and repeat component of the sport is really what's hard. And I think if I guess I am proud to have like gone through that experience, and it has shaped me into who I am. But there will always kind of, maybe not, but for now there is that like void that I knew I had the potential to do something. And obviously Nashon being there, and it didn't happen for me. So
Yeah.
and I'm not making an excuse. It's just I know that I was as good as a lot of the best in the country, and unfortunately I didn't get to show that at the weight that I felt like I was meant for. But it is what it is.
I want to talk about one of the other important lessons you learned at Cornell, which is you went to college without knowing how to ride a bike.
Yeah. Well,
Your
I
brother
still don't.
failed you in this, apparently. Didn't
Yeah.
teach you how to ride a bike. But who did?
Yeah.
Who tried to teach you how to ride a bike?
Well, so Kyle Dake and Connor David, Joe Stanzione. I remember one weekend we had they found out and they were like, man, they were so embarrassed for me that we spent a couple weekends in parking lots of them trying to teach me, and I still don't know. So, which is okay. I mean, I've gotten this far without it. So,
I mean, I haven't ridden one in many years, but I did know back in the day. So I think Jesse, by the way, I could probably front him out pretty bad here. Jesse's been riding a bike all over Arizona here for the last week, so very proud of it. I might have to get
13 miles the other day cruising.
He's not riding like a cool speed bike though, or like a road bike like Hag. He's riding like a lime green cruiser. That's at his parents' house.
It's legit.
Your brother wanted us to ask you about one more thing for you, because you've already told your funny story, but why are you so afraid of birds?
Man, you guys are really airing me out. Shoot, man, I don't know. Ever since I was little, I've had a phobia of birds, and it's not like me not liking them. It's just like I have like a phobia, and like obviously living in New York City for a while, it was a crazy experience to even get to work every day because pigeons are like all over. But yeah, man, I don't know. Now that like there's like a bunch of turkey. I'm not a hunter. I'm not like outdoorsy at all. I'm total city kid, but I think it's like turkey season now, and I keep seeing like all these pictures of people seeing like pictures of them hunting, and that would never be me. That would never be me.
But you're rooting for them to do a good job.
I hope they go extinct. Pick them off one bird at a time.
Well, I also want to point out, I don't want to scare you or anything, but if you look down at your shirt, there is a bird.
I know. So. I knew that was going to get brought up. See, I can look at pictures of birds and it'd be fine. But yeah, even like so like we're the Liberty Blue Jays, and even like that Blue Jay mascot, I'm not like, I don't like that. Like when that thing like starts walking around the gym. And I know, man, it's weird.
It's just a sweaty 14-year-old in a costume, but it's.
I know. Yeah, no, I don't know.
I'd like to get a film of Brick similar to the Eric Berry with the horse.
Those there's a few out there that do exist. I know you guys asked for like funny stories at the end, but it's not funny to me, but funny for other people.
So you have the videos, what you're saying? We can reveal that at some point.
I don't.
What you really have done, by the way, just so you know, is if Reggie Burse is watching this, you have really set yourself up for some serious, probably traumatic pranks from him at Fargo at some point. Like you're going to come in a room full of birds or something.
See that, like I'll put Reggie down if he tries to do that. So he knows that too.
Don't be too confident, all right? He's very sneaky for a big guy, all right?
Yeah.
I just walked into a hotel last year, and he jumped out from seemingly nowhere and attacked me, put me on the ground. I got like a permanent rug burn from it. I've seen him snap down Jeff Davis before. I've seen him attack a lot of people. He's very stealthy. He's crafty. So
That's fine. Well, PSA, if he tries anything, then he'll get smoked.
I like it.
You're making Reggie the enemy here.
Hey, he's got to be included in every episode somehow.
Right.